Try that again. Good morning. Hope everybody had a wonderful long weekend. I hope everybody had a wonderful long weekend. And if you didn't play golf yesterday, you sure missed it. Y'all bow with me. Gracious and kind Father, again we come asking you to forgive us of our sins, to say thank you for everything. Thank you for being there for us in our times of need. Thank you for being there for us when things are better. Let us realize that all things come through you. Let us do things that make you happy. Be with us, lead, guide, and direct us. Help us get through this week. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Matt's gonna be late. Chairman will go to the front of the line. Senators will leave the building. Don't have any. Dadgum missed it. Okay, quick is good. Mr. Hitchens.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I still love you, even if it's not Valentine's Day. But I got three bills on today. The first one is House Bill 867. If you look at the bottom of the page under Modified Open, it's the last one. What this is a Peace Officer Standards and Training Cleanup Bill. It does about four things. There were a couple of new members added last year, so it changes the number of people for a quorum. It provides for their 9 investigators upon retirement to keep their service weapons. It changes the entrance exam requirements. It's a general knowledge test. In order to be a peace officer in this state, you have to pass an entrance examination. If you fail it the first time, there's a 30-day waiting period. It's going to waive the waiting period. It's also asked that we waive the test for those who hold an associate's or bachelor's degree because they've already taken an SAT or GRE, and they ought to have the skills to master that. And the last thing it does is it takes away the post-certification process for chaplains. It's a bureaucratic nightmare, and they think each police agency that wants to have a chaplain ought to be able to pick their own without going through the process. And that's it.
They go through the chaplain thing again.
Sir?
Tell me the chaplain thing again.
There's a process now where there's some required training and certification to establish law enforcement chaplains. What this would do is do away with that process and allow each local law enforcement agency to select whoever they want to be chaplains without sending them away to training and making them update their requirements every year like peace officers have to do.
Do they get to have a gun and everything?
No, sir. They don't get to have a gun and everything.
Next one.
If you turn over to the back page, House Bill 840. This is a bill, I had a similar bill about 2 years ago, which in the area I live in, most of the 75th Ranger Battalion is there. They're over back and forth Afghanistan and Iraq on a pretty regular basis. I found out from some of the single guys when they came back, if they had been over in their combat zone and their tags had expired, when they came back they had to pay a 10% penalty. Since then have found out that in my district, 165th Airlift Wing has also has a similar problem in that some of them are small business owners, some of them are commercial pilots, but a lot of them are crew members, and when they're flying over in those areas, they typically stay over there for 6 months. And some of their small business licenses have expired, and when they come back, they have to pay up to 15% penalties for that. All this does is give them 60 days from the time they return from a combat zone and show their orders that they've been there to pay their fees without a penalty. The government doesn't lose any money. They just don't collect the penalty fees.
No questions. You got another one?
Yes, sir.
Go.
This is on the second page under modified structure, House Bill 703, which is about halfway down in modified structure. This is the governor's public safety support bill. I've been up here before with it. I think I probably made a mistake in leading people to believe that this was a bill that provided mental or emotional health care for a long period of time. Actually, what this is debriefing and defusing. Typically, if you reach these people with trained personnel within 24 to 72 hours, debrief them, defuse them, and have a person that's qualified to let somebody know if they need further psychological care to have that done through a clinical psychologist. This is just one and done. They go in when something happens. The other day when they had the shooting in Locust Grove, they were down there within about 5 or 6 hours to debrief and defuse. They were up in Augusta when they had the shooting at the veterans home when the employee went outside to meet her ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, and he shot and killed her. And we had a trooper last Friday that shot a person here in Atlanta. There's a lot of emotional trauma that goes with some of these things, and people suffer for them. And the psychological community research shows that if you get to them within the first 24 to 72 hours and follow a 7-step process, that they do much better than those who don't. And it typically puts off PSTD.
Any questions? Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Hitchens, isn't it true that the services that are described in this bill are already being provided by the Department of Public Safety at this time?
That's correct. It's been in effect at some form since 2005.
Thank you.
And I think it ought to be noted too that we took out the National Guard and the DOT employees, so this is a streamlined version.
Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Hitchens, are you looking at LC 41-1433S?
Yes.
If you look down at line 110, 109 and 110, such term also includes any members of the Georgia National Guard. Is that?
Let me pull it out here.
I haven't reviewed this in detail, but I just heard you say it doesn't include National Guard members, so I want to make sure that
No, it's
we're
not
all
S.
traveling on the
It's
same
not
page.
S. It's a later date, and I don't have it, but I saw it. They brought it out of Legislative Council, and that's both been eliminated.
Okay, so this LC version we have in our books may not be the,
That's not the correct version.
okay, thank you.
No other questions. Thank you. Mr. Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thought this had already been taken care of, but there is a Senate Bill 101. I thought the good senator had already been over here. What this is just to allow full-time hourly employees with the Department of Natural Resources to transfer from their Georgia defined contribution plans to the employment retirement system of Georgia. That's simply what this does.
It would be a good idea that you can tell your senator that they don't get a pass on standing on that wall.
I will certainly do that, sir.
And you tell him he don't have to come till after the 28th day, 'cause I ain't gonna do nothing. It's awful hard to do for him anyway. Mr. Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Bring before you House Bill 769. It's the recommendations from the Rural Development Council. It addresses pharmacy, micro-hospitals billing, the rural hospital tax credit. If you remember, on the last time I was here last week, there was a little bit of discussion about the pharmacy part, which is the remote order entry. We made an agreement with pharmacists over the weekend, number of phone calls and emails back and forth. I think you'll see an amendment before you tomorrow in the rules that will help satisfy everyone. Maybe.
Any questions? No more questions. Thank you, Mr. Jaspers. Mr. Battles. Mr. Battles. Stay right there. Mr. Stevens. You're okay? I didn't mean to forget you. Thank you, Mr. Battles. I just wanted you to see you. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Today I bring you House Bill 697 using LC 345333S. It's located on page 3 on the second from the bottom. This bill will extend the sales tax exemption for 1 year for our nonprofit community health centers.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nix. You're getting to be a regular, Mr. Nix.
Well, this will be my last one, I think, sir. Thank you.
Promises,
I would like to ask for House Bill 785. House Bill 785 is related to a new technology that's used to recycle plastics, and these are like plastic bags. They're things that normally cannot be recycled and made into other plastic products, but it actually breaks it down and extracts the oil, the waxes, and things from it. And what the bill does is to create the statutory certainty about how this will be identified, and it makes sure that they are not classified as waste disposal facilities. And they do this through the process of defining some terms that they use, and it distinguishes these recyclers from waste handling and waste storage facilities.
Ms. Smith.
I cannot hear you.
We can hear you.
You can hear me.
Try again.
Go ahead.
What this bill does is keep these types of plastics out of the landfill, so they're never going to the landfill. Is that not correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. The things that they're getting now would be going directly to the landfill, but they're captured before they go so that they can be recycled and returned to the elements that created them.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you House Bill 704. It's on the first page under Modified Structured Rule. It is just above the third hole punch on that page. It is your constituents are currently unable to hold contractors accountable who knowingly and intentionally break the law and bury garbage on property after they build a house. This would extend the statute proposed so that your constituents could hold them accountable for having broken the law and make sure that they feel the cost of having broken it.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cobble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you committee House Bill 826 under Modified Structured Rule. It's the third page, 9th down from the top. This bill simply allows financial institutions or wholesaler or retailer of firearms or pharmaceuticals to contract for direct law enforcement dispatch when an intrusion alarm is activated.
No, way we do. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this, Representative Connell, how long have you been in the House?
Well, I'm not the newest member.
Well, you're right about that. But you're the newest member in this room.
Likely so, sir.
And this is your first bill in the Rules Committee, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. I just want to make sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You noticed how nice I was to him. I didn't get on to him. That doesn't permit y'all from not getting on to him. Well, Ms. Hughley's going to start on you. I can't hear. Try it now.
Yes.
I see that you have firearms, banking institutions, and pharmaceuticals listed. Why were those, why were those ones chosen?
So the specific carve-out deals with, current law requires the alarm monitoring company to make 2 attempts to verify before dispatch of law enforcement to reduce the number of false alarms and using those resources, the law enforcement resources unnecessarily. But in the case of financial institutions and wholesaler, retailer of firearms or pharmaceuticals, we feel that that represents a high enough risk to the community if there is a burglary in progress that it merits a direct dispatch if the property or business owner would like to contract that with the alarm monitoring company.
Mr. Williams. No, it ain't working. Y'all just going to.
I just want to make sure you said that it would take 2 persons to lower the false alarm. Okay, I understand the false alarm, but I sure don't want to be real deal waiting on the second one. I'm hard to help.
Yes, sir, and and that's the purpose of, so the two verification attempts is the current law, and is really necessary because many burglar intrusion alarm, and there are other exceptions in the law. The law further states that in the case of a fire alarm or panic or robbery in progress alarm, or in cases where the crime in progress has been verified by video or audio, that those can be directly dispatched, but otherwise would require 2 attempts to verify the alarm before law enforcement is dispatched to the site of the alarm. This would simply say that, would add a 3rd exception to say that for these 3 kind of high-risk targets, that they could be directly dispatched as well.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Whoa. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're not changing the existing requirements for verification except with regard to alarms in a bank or in a pharmacy. Is that correct?
Or a firearm wholesaler.
A firearm wholesaler.
That's correct. Outside of those 3, the law would stay exactly the same for alarm monitoring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. This morning I present to you House Bill 745. It's on the first page, 7th down, under modified open rule. And this legislation would do 2 things. The first is that it would provide an opportunity for a victim of domestic violence to break a lease upon presentment of a court order. And the second thing that it does is that it addresses some issues that the Apartment Association wanted to clarify with respect to a landlord's obligations to provide a list of damages when a tenant moves out. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Stevens. It ain't worth, just be loud.
Yes, sir, that is true.
No, no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Burnell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. I bring before you House Resolution 655, page 2 at the top, number 3, to recognize Gold Star Father's Day on November 9th annually in the state of Georgia. Glad to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I bring to you House Bill 762. It's on the bottom of page 2, third from the bottom. This bill would add to the existing sexual education requirements that students also be taught about sexual abuse and assault awareness. It also provides for the training of the teachers who teach that. Passed unanimously out of both subcommittee and full education committee.
No questions. Thank you.
I have a second bill. Could I ask for that too?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. It's on page 3 under structured rule, the second from the top, HB 482. It's the Educational Scholarship Accounts Act, which would allow students who are not performing well or reaching their potential in our public school system under certain circumstances. It would allow their families to have an account administrated by the Department of Treasury, which would allow them to pursue options that would help them fulfill their educational goals better.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I have before you HB 817. It's on the third page, 7 from the top. This bill deals with private investigators and private security. Currently under code, they have an exemption for window tinting in section 1. Since a lot of these businesses use their personal vehicles, it just changes the exemption to say a vehicle owned or operated by. And then in section 2, private investigators and private security are licensed under the Secretary of State. They have to go through firearms training and maintain proficiency and annual proficiency on those weapons. So this bill, they already have exemptions in code for where they can keep, like some of the restricted places. This section just kind of puts it in line with all the changes we've made recently to the probate court license to make sure that they can still perform their job duties, and it restricts them to say on line 28 that while such individuals in performance of his or her duties. So currently the restrictions they have 24/7 carte blanche. This just says while they're performing their job duties, the exemptions that are carved out to put their code section and the probate license code sections in line are only applicable to them while they're performing their job. And that's the bill.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Clark, I was trying to listen to you, and you started out talking about window tinting, right?
Yes, sir.
And then we moved to something else.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to follow all that.
All right, so section 1 of the bill, which is, it deals with the window tinting, which is for the private investigators and private security. So are you wondering about germaneness here? Is okay. Okay. Right. So section 1 deals with the window tinting. Section 2 is dealing with their exemptions, well, how they're regulated in code section 433810, where they're licensed, yes, where private investigators are licensed in their carry permit that they have that's different than the general public's Georgia weapons carry license.
So I got the part about we're going to let them have window tinting. I got that part.
Yes, sir.
What we're going to do with the other?
They already have exemptions. with all the language that we've done recently with gun legislation, this is just bringing that back in line with the exemptions that they previously had as well. Practically, so say there's a security like a money truck that goes to pick up money at a college from an administrative building. Currently, the way the law reads, there's some question of whether or not they can actually carry their firearm into the administrative building while they're collecting money. This would allow them to perform their job duties. Thank you.
So let's go back to tinning. So we're going to allow another group of people to tint their windows. Is that right?
No, sir, they're already allowed to. It's striking the in the course of business and changing it to owned or operated, because, like I said, a lot of them already they're using their personal vehicles, and so there's been a lot of them are getting ticketed when they're driving their personal vehicle back home and they get pulled over for window tinting. It's just allowing them to have the exemption that's already carved out for them in law without having to. Currently, they're getting a lot of tickets in this industry. If they drop a VIP off and they're driving around the block while they're waiting on the VIP to finish their conference, they're getting ticketed for that as well.
Do you know how many different agencies get to tint their windows? I'm asking.
No, sir, I do not know.
I see my colonel back there in the back. If I were a state patrolman and walked up to a car whose windows were tinted, I don't know whether I would walk up to that car. And there's a lot of that crap out here on the streets. I don't know whether we issue tickets anymore for tinted windows. They're not doing a good enough job of it. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Hilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 787, which is at the top of page 3. House Bill 787 accomplishes 3 things. Number 1, it allows our state charter schools, of which there are approximately 33 in the state of Georgia, to participate in what's called RESA, which is a ongoing training program for teachers. Secondly, it allows them to modify their funding formula from the average of the lowest 5 districts to the average per student across Georgia. And finally, number 3, it allows them to participate in what's called forward funding. And I'll stand for questions.
Ms. Hughley.
Yeah, there is a fiscal note with it. I believe the number is 16 million. The net effect essentially will be to attract better educational options for our children here in Georgia.
No more questions. Never mind. Whoa. Mr. Beverly.
It's the average of the 5 lowest school districts in Georgia.
No more questions. Thank you. Ms. Bentley.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Happy Tuesday. I am back again with House Bill 735 on page 3 under structured rule. House Bill 735 is an expenditures on the maintenance of a railroad track owned or leased by a Class 3 railroad company. 735 on page 3.
No questions. Judge, are you on this committee? Thank you. Welcome. Good morning. Ms. Bent, that's no more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Price.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring you back again House Bill 161, which is under modified structure, the second one on page 2. This is new and improved 161 that is a comprehensive approach to stopping the spread of diseases by sharing dirty needles, and also comprehensively to get people into treatment services, and this responds to the opioid crisis that we're in the midst of. And I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I come before you under structured on the very back. House Bill 827 is a modification to our rural hospital tax credit, moving from 90% to 100%, extending the sunset to 2021, and also making clear that pass-through entities can take advantage of this credit.
No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Light.
Thank you, committee. I bring before you this morning on page 3, modified structure, 10th one down, HB 835. This bill allows the Department of Revenue to issue a temporary license for off-premise sale of tobacco products. Currently, business owners are required to file under a separate sales tax ID for temporary off-premise sales. This bill simplifies the tax filings.
Mr. Fleming.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
She don't know what a Tampa is.
Oh, good. I don't smoke. I don't know. They say yes.
Have a Macanudo. That might be better than a Tampa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Come before you today with HB 814, first page, fourth one up. This is going to give the county governing authority to establish salaries and benefits for coroners. Throughout Georgia, there's different legislation that has been passed through the years that the legislature has actually set salary for some of the coroners. No coroner will ever make less than he's making now, so this would not reduce anyone's pay, but this does allow the counties to give a cost of living increase. It does allow them to put them under their health plan. Be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. The salary for coroners across the state is currently set by local legislation. Is that correct?
Most of it is. It has to do with, there's a guideline that based on population, the 0 to 11,889 is $1,200 a year. 11,890 to 1999 is $2,400 a year. 20,000 to 34,999 is $3,600 a year. But this actually will help a lot of the deputy coroners who are paid per call, per case. They only receive $175. Some of them don't receive that, but it allows, it gives a control back to your local government authority.
Right. So going forward, it would not be the General Assembly would no longer have the role of setting that coroner salary. That would be already taken care of by your bill. Is that correct?
Pretty much so, but it would give the county and the coroner a fourth choice, so they can refer back to what the state or what this code is. on what the schedule is, or it would allow the counties and the coroners to negotiate themselves.
Thank you.
No more questions, thank you.
Okay, so I have one other bill, third one up on the first page, HB 825. This is this is for the GBI, the Chief Medical Examiner. They have about 350 skeletal remains at the crime lab. They have run out of storage space. They're asking for permission to bury these skeletal remains. There is no fiscal note with this. The GBI does already have the funds available to carry out this task, but it will allow them to give these Jane Does, John Does a final resting place. DNA has been done on these skeletal remains, so that if anyone comes forward in the years to come and wishes to claim the remains, the GBI would know right where they're buried, and they can go exhume them, disinter them, and turn them over to the family.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will you and Representative Bentley have to recuse yourself when this comes to the floor?
We will not gain monetarily at all. This is something for the GBI. We will volunteer to, I'm volunteering my services today, sir.
You didn't answer the question.
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry, sir.
I think the question was, would you and Mrs. Bentley recuse yourself when this vote is taken?
Oh, yes, sir, we would.
If it, let me preface that with, if it gets on the floor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No more questions, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Wait a second. Whoa. Mr. Setzler, and the mic doesn't work, Ed.
I'm still a freshman. I don't know. You know, when I went through the lodge, they told me word of mouth. It wasn't written down, and I'm still don't know what questions to ask, Mr. Chairman. I'm still learning. I don't anticipate anyone voting against that. After all, this will be giving these people dignified burial, and something that's very much needed.
No more questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Committee.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I bring today, I'm asking for two bills. First bill is on page 1 under modified open. It's 6 from the bottom, and it's just giving all veterans the chance to get a free driver's license. And I grabbed the numbers. Right now, currently, last year, 72,000 applied for a driver's license for free, and a total of 572,382 are current wartime veterans in Georgia and can get it. So it shows you they're not utilizing it even close to what they could. And we have a total of 752,882 total veterans. So this would hardly do anything to change how much we are currently spending on, or change the number on how many are given out for free. And as I've said, when I go into the driver's license to get a new one, I've paid for it every single time I've got in, just because it's you have to go find your DD 214, and so a lot of times we're seeing that veterans are not utilizing the free driver's license. But I think it would just would just make our state look great, as in we're very friendly to veterans. And so I think it's just a great bill to help us with the future BRAC that's coming probably in the next few years.
That's bill number 750 rather than 6 from the bottom.
Any questions?
I'll do that.
All right, thank you. The second bill is 8 from the bottom under modified rule, and that's the Jeremy Nelson, Nick Blakely Sudden Cardiac Arrest Prevention Act.
What's your bill number?
House Bill 743. And that would just bring cardiac arrest prevention awareness into schools and training. And it's passed in multiple states. And there's around 600 to 1,000 kids who are dying every single year from cardiac arrest. And so this is something that's not just going to help save kids on the field of play, but also just in life. As they go on with life, you know, they could be saving a parent, a grandparent, or somebody just at the mall that happens to. So I've talked with the state superintendent and the Georgia High School Association, all in support of it. So I've made sure to sit down with anybody who would be affected, and they all have given me the thumbs up and said it's a good bill. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
No questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Rakestraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I have two bills that I bring before you. The first one is on page 1, House Bill 833 under open rule. And this is a bill that the surveyors have asked for to remove the hydrology coursework from hydraulic engineering courses and give them the courses instead that they're actually using, because this hydrology is kind of moved to the engineering side of the field, and so they're asking for courses that are more germane to what they're doing on a daily basis. And I'm trying to think whatever, hold on. So there were some changes to it. So I believe that's the only thing that it's doing currently with the changes that we've made. And the other bill, do you have any questions on that one?
No questions.
Okay. The other bill is House Resolution 913, and this is to create a joint study committee between the House and the Senate to look at pre-arrest diversion programs. And this is a new and emerging field in law enforcement to create pathways to divert people into mental health and addiction treatment that need mental health and addiction services rather than jail, because jail is not necessarily where people belong if they have a mental health and addiction issue. And to study what kind of resources we have around the state, how we can bring those together, and how we can create a bridge and a pathway to break down the barriers to treatment and get people the help they need so that they're not reoffending. So those are the two bills I'm requesting, and it is on page 2.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Third page, structured rule, third one down, House Bill 664. This would increase the income tax deduction from $2,000 and $4,000 to $4,000 and $8,000 if contributing to a child's 529 college savings plan in Georgia.
No questions. Thank you.
Mr.
Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, under modified structure, the fifth bill down, I'm asking for House Bill 473. Our service dog community is being negatively impacted by people with their pets and comfort animals, wanting to take them everywhere, and this bill would make it a felon or a misdemeanor for those who are trying to pass off a pet as a service animal.
No questions. Thank you. My mama told me if I ever wore a hat in the house, she'd slap it off my head. Got socks?
Yes, sir.
Personal joke. I enjoy it. Well, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Bring before you today House Bill 784 on the top of page 3. I couldn't get my chocolate lab in the house, so I brought his likeness today and my favorite camouflage props. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this would create a Ducks Unlimited license plate in the state of Georgia. Ducks Unlimited is a nonprofit organization with 1 million members throughout North America, 20,000 in Georgia, and all of these funds would stay inside the DNR and Wildlife Resource Division for habitat conservation in the state of Georgia.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
If y'all got one, hit a button. Mr. Peak. got a question, raise your hand. Next is Mr. A. Powell. No. Which one was that, Alan?
721.
Okay. Ooh. Any questions, Ms. Powell?
And
Nope. Next one.
I'd also like to put my name beside Mr. Clark's HB 817. That's a once every 20-year upgrade and clean up for the private detective license, Private Detectives Acts. And I'd also like to put my name beside Mr. Deffenbaugh's 856, which is so simple. It's just that adds the Department of Community Services and gives them an ex officio appointee to the Board of Public Safety.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for HB 790, Representative Estration's bill. It simply implements the recommendations of the Court Reform Council. And also, I'd like to put my name by Representative Rhodes' bill, HB 782.
Which one?
782.
Where is it?
Top of third page.
Okay.
It's top of page 3.
Okay. Ms. Dempsey, behind you. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are two bills. The first one is on page 2, just below the middle, HB 646 that I've talked about, continuation of the tightly drawn bariatric pilot program. And then on page 3, HB 853, that is also at about the middle of that page. And this will allow education funding to follow public school students who are in our licensed psychiatric residential treatment facilities. In some cases, those dollars are not following the children, and they are sent there to get better and do not need to fall behind in their education.
Questions? No questions. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for two, if you'll allow me. The first one is on page 2, at the top of the page, House Bill 890. Unfortunately, there's a growing epidemic of shoplifting out there with our retail folks, and this is a bill they requested in working with the district attorneys. Right now, the practice is more and more for these people that are shoplifting to head out the fire door, set the alarm off and whatnot. But it's not a separate misdemeanor to use that fire door to commit this shoplifting. So this would simply make it also a misdemeanor to use that fire emergency door when you're shoplifting. The second one, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is on page 3, almost a little below the middle of the page, House Bill 907. This deals with the election of our appointed district attorneys. Once they face the voters in November, they would get a full 4-year term. It changes the law just to be just like how we elect our judges.
Mr. Williams? No. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside HB 735, the Rules Study Committee bill.
Okay. Ms. Ballinger in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to request House Bill 798. Unlike many of the other license tags, this doesn't, unfortunately, one of the inadvertent circumstances that was created whenever we created the volunteer fire department registration process was that a lot of our local tax commissioners decided that volunteer firefighters were no longer eligible for a firefighter tag. So this corrects that. It also provides a public safety piece for our firefighters in that it removes the requirement that fire chiefs, once they fire a firefighter, have to go actually and retrieve that tag. It allows that terminated firefighter to go and turn it in to their tax commissioner and get a regular tag. I would also like to put my name beside Senate Bill 131.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the third page, House Bill 895. Young people have found something else to abuse. It's dextromethorphan. It's found in some of our cough syrups. They are mixing it with Sprite and Lifesavers and getting high on it. This would limit the sale, would keep anybody from 18 being able to buy the products that have that in it. There's safeguards in. We worked it out with the grocery stores and so forth for the people that sell these products. There are other cough syrups that people can choose without it. We're just trying to get ahead of a dangerous-looking trend that is starting across our country.
You need Mr. Powell.
I'm not asking for a bill, but I want one recommitted if I could. It's House Bill 820. It's on the yellow sheet.
I have a motion to recommit. Second. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's recommitted. Hand it this way. Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like your consideration on HB 482 and HB 664, both bills that provide assistance for families who pay a lot of dollars out of pocket for their kids' education. 482 and 664. Structured rule, page 3.
664 is also structured, page 3.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first page under modified open rule, House Bill 745, I'd like to put my name beside that one. The landlords are not opposed to that one today. And also on the last page, House Bill 827 for our rural hospitals, to keep those from going under.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to put my name beside two bills. Page 1, Randy Nix's bill, Bill 785, keeping some plastics out of landfills. And on the third page at the bottom, Representative Taylor's bill, 697, which extends for 1 year the nonprofit health centers exemption. Thank you.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside HB 849, very important update provision for partnerships.
What number? Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside HB 735 on page 3, Representative Bentley's bill. Also on the last page, I'd like to put my name beside HB 827, Representative Kelly's bill.
Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to put my name beside House Resolution 888 and House Bill 697.
Mr. Trammell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 672, Representative Thomas's bill under modified open, and HB 745, Representative Holcomb's bill.
Mr. Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside HR 655 on the second page. Thank you.
Mr. Smyrie.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 738 by Representative Oliver and House Bill 745 by Representative Holcomb. Thank you.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move that H.R. 992 on the general yellow calendar be moved back to the Education Committee, and the author, Kevin Tanner, agrees.
That's a motion. Mr. Smith seconds. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. It is back. Y'all are getting too wordy on the wall. Okay, open room. This is the calendar for tomorrow, Wednesday. Open rule H.R. 744. Have a move to hear a second. All in favor signify by aye. All right, it's opposed, same sign. It's on. Modified open HB 856. Do I hear a second? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Modified structure HB 161. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Modified structure HB 646. Have moved second. All in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Modified structure HB 769. And all those in favor signify by aye. There will be an amendment on that thing on the floor. Modified structure HB 782. Do I hear a second? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under structure, HB 697. Have moved in a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? It's on. Under structure, HB 735. Any opposed? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? That might have worked out good. HB 827. Any opposed? It's on. That's it.